I gave them 15 years. I missed my daughter's first steps for a quarterly review, skipped my father's funeral to close a $30 million merger in Chicago, and worked through a localized stroke at my desk because I thought I was the only person who could keep the company from collapsing. I wasn't just an employee, I was the engine. Or so I thought. The realization didn't come during a dramatic board meeting or a tense confrontation. It happened on a Tuesday morning at 9:02 a.m. I walked into the lobby of our Manhattan headquarters, my hand reaching for my badge to swipe the turnstile. The light didn't turn green. It flashed red, a dull, robotic beep that echoed through the marble hall. I tried again. I looked at the security guard, a man named Mike I'd bought coffee for every morning for 6 years. He didn't look me in the eye. He just stared at his monitor and whispered, "I'm sorry, Julian. You need to wait for HR in the seating area." I looked over at the lounge and saw a cardboard box sitting on the coffee table. My name was written on the side in black Sharpie. Inside were the contents of my office, my daughter's graduation photo, my Employee of the Decade plaque, and my spare tie. I hadn't even been told I was fired yet. My access had been cut at midnight, and my life's work had been boxed up by a temp while I was at home sleeping, dreaming about the next project. That was the moment I realized the most terrifying truth of the corporate world. To the company, I wasn't a hero. I was a line item that had finally become too expensive to keep. To understand how I got there, you have to understand the lie I told myself for over a decade. In the United States, we are raised on the myth of the indispensable man. We are told that if we work harder, stay later, and sacrifice more than everyone else, we become part of the foundation. I was a senior VP of operations for a global logistics firm. My phone was an extension of my hand. I answered emails at 3 a.m. on Christmas. I took calls while my wife was in labor. I wore my burnout like a badge of honor, believing that the more I suffered, the more unfireable I became. The company culture fed this delusion. My CEO, a man who called himself my mentor, used to tell the board that the company couldn't breathe without me. "Julian is the glue," he'd say during town halls. "We're a family here, and Julian is the big brother we all rely on." I believed every word. I thought the family wouldn't turn on its own. The shift started subtly. It began with a minor health scare, a warning shot from my body that I ignored. I had a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, right in the middle of a Friday afternoon. My vision blurred and my left arm went numb. Instead of calling an ambulance, I took an aspirin and finished the slide deck. I didn't want to show weakness. I didn't want the machine to see a glitch. But someone noticed. A junior associate saw me stumble, saw the gray tint of my skin. 2 weeks later, I was asked to onboard a new consultant. His name was Connor. He was 26, had an Ivy League degree, and zero experience in logistics. But he was cheap, and he was fast with AI integration. My CEO told me Connor was there to lighten my load so I could focus on high-level strategy. What he actually meant was that Connor was there to download my brain. For 3 months, I taught Connor everything. I shared my contacts, my shortcuts, and the secret political maneuvers I used to keep our international partners happy. I thought I was grooming a successor for 10 years down the line. I didn't realize I was building my own replacement in real time. The more I taught him, the less the CEO called me. The late-night emergency texts stopped coming to my phone. They were going to Connor's. The power dynamic shifted so quietly I barely felt the ground moving. I was being phased out of meetings I used to lead. When I asked why, I was told it was to protect my health. They used my own loyalty against me, framing my disposability as a gesture of care. The Friday before the Tuesday in the lobby, we had a massive win. A contract with a federal agency that secured the company's revenue for the next decade. I had spent 18 months negotiating it. At the celebratory dinner, the CEO raised a glass. He thanked the team. He thanked the board. Then he looked at Connor and said, "And thanks to Connor for bringing us into the future with his new streamlined systems." He didn't mention my name. Not once. I sat there, the taste of the expensive steak turning to ash in my mouth. I felt a cold shiver of regret. I had missed my son's championship game for that contract. I had missed my wife's birthday, and in the moment of victory, I had already been erased. When I finally met with HR in that lobby, it wasn't even a meeting. It was a transaction. A woman I had never met handed me a severance agreement. She didn't talk about my 15 years of service. She didn't mention the stroke or the missed funerals. She talked about restructuring and synergy. She told me that according to their new metrics, my role had been optimized. I asked to speak to the CEO. She told me he was unavailable. I looked past her and saw Connor walking toward the elevators. He was wearing the same brand of suit I wore. He was carrying the same leather briefcase I had recommended. He saw me standing there with my cardboard box, and he gave me a small, polite nod, the kind of nod you give a stranger at a bus stop. I walked out of that building into the bright New York sun, and the world kept moving. The taxis kept honking, the crowds kept pushing, and inside that skyscraper, the company didn't miss a beat. The emails were still being sent. The mergers were still being closed. The family had replaced its big brother in less than 8 hours, and the chair I had sat in for 15 years was already being adjusted to fit someone else's height. The financial disaster wasn't immediate. I had a severance, but the psychological disaster was total. My identity was the job. Without the title, without the indispensable status, I didn't know who I was. I looked at my wife and realized I was a stranger in my own home. I had spent 15 years building a kingdom that didn't belong to me, and I had neglected the home that did. The most shocking part of the realization? It wasn't that they fired me. It was that they were right. They could survive without me. Every one of us is just a placeholder. We are a collection of tasks and a salary figure. The moment the cost of the salary outweighs the value of the tasks, we are gone. I spent years believing I was the foundation of that company. I was actually just the scaffolding, temporary, functional, and easily torn down once the structure was finished. The moral of this story is a warning for every high performer listening to this. Your company is not your family. Your boss is not your friend. And your loyalty is a one-way street. If you died tonight, your job posting would be online before your obituary. Don't sacrifice the people who will actually miss you for a company that will replace you before the coffee in your mug gets cold. If you've ever had that replaceable moment where the corporate mask fell off, tell your story in the comments. Let's break the myth of the indispensable man together. Subscribe to Unspoken Stories for more deep dives into the dark side of the grind. Go home. Hug your family. They are the only ones who can't replace you.